Our sacred text today comes from the Gospel of Luke, 12th chapter, verses 13 through 21, the parable of the rich fool. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who set me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly, and he thought to himself, "What should I do, for I have no place to store my crops?" Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So if it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God."
The word of God for the people of God. Amen. Many years ago, 50 or more I think now, there was a musical and film released called Fiddler on the Roof. Some of you are nodding, I guess you remember. Some of you, it was way before you were even born, but maybe you've heard of it. But if not, the main character was a man called Tevye. And Tevye didn't have very much, and he sang the song, "If I Were a Rich Man." If I were a rich man, yabba dabba dabba dooba dooba deedle diddle dum. And he went on, "I wouldn't have to work hard, deedle deedle deedle." And he said, "You know, I'd build me a big tall house right in the middle of the town, with one long staircase going up and one even longer coming down, and a third one going nowhere, just for show." I love Tevye. He's so relatable. If you don't think so, did any of you notice the frenzy over the $1 billion lottery prize this week? Oh, people were going bananas over that thing. Everyone thought they were going to win, and lottery tickets were being sold, and they were flying out the door right and left. If I were a rich man, if I were a rich woman, if I were a rich human being, did you ever dream of being rich? Very rich? Filthy rich? Rich like Bill Gates rich, and Elon Musk rich, and Jeff Bezos rich? I don't know if you personally ever did, but I think it's a big club. And yeah, you know, the money and the things it can buy can be very nice. Imagine being someone who can afford a skybox at the Darrell Royal Stadium. Don't you know they have it good up there? I mean, where all of us peasants are down in the cheap seats, and up there, I bet it's caviar, canapes, and cocktails. And I wouldn't know, I've never been there myself, but I've heard stories. If I were a rich man, I could deedle, deedle, diddle, dum all day, said Tevye. Well, lucky for me, I have an inside track, because I know someone who got what Tevye was singing about. And she's my best friend, Donna. Donna's probably watching. I told her I'd be talking about her today, and she's okay with that. I told her I was going to say, it's all been pre-cleared. And Donna, with her first husband, they were very rich. And they had the big tall house in the middle of the town. I don't know if they had 3 staircases, but I'm sure they had one big fancy one. And I asked Donna, what was it like? What was it like to have that huge, beautiful house? She said, it was so much work. She said, when you have a house that size, you cannot manage it by yourself. You have to have staff. She says, I was hiring people and firing people, and they'd get sick, they wouldn't show up, they'd quit. I'd be scrambling to get more staff, sometimes at short notice. It was so much stress. And she said it was a lot. And then, you know, everything in the house has got to be maintained. So it's the house itself, and it's the structure, it's the foundation, the plumbing, and the electrical. And you got to keep the gutters cleaned out. Got to have people for the grounds. You got to have people to clean the inside of it. She said it never stopped. You know, the leisure time, the eat, drink, and be merry, the times when we enjoyed it were quite rare. It was a lot of work. Funny, really, because our society honors and rewards and reveres the very rich. You know, we might talk trash about Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos behind their back, but you know, to their face, they get serious respect. Don't they? There's Elon Musk went to outer space. Or was it Jeff Bezos? Maybe it was both of them. One of them took William Shatner, and everybody talked about it for a week. I mean, it's a big deal. The people up in the skyboxes, I'm sure it's yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, with the wait staff, and that's wonderful. And then we get this parable where we have a guy who's just like him, and Jesus says, you fool. But we don't tend to think that way. So Jesus called him a fool. Was he right? Well, as Seth Meyer says, maybe it's time for a closer look. Maybe. You know, I've been in the church for 12 years. I spend most of my time in workplaces and out on the street and so on. So that's where all this comes from. So this closer look. It was Donna trying to run her huge house. She was rich. She knew she was rich. And, you know, but do we pick on the billionaires only about all this? Because a closer look reveals some interesting things. I heard a story about a reporter once who went and interviewed people who had oceanfront property and owned boats in the marina nearby. And she went to the first couple that she got told about that agreed to be interviewed and did some small talk and then said, are you rich? Here's where you find out that the word rich, although it's a neutral word, it just means having abundant money and possessions, nothing more. It's really not a neutral word at all. Because when she asked them that point blank, they flinched. Said, oh, no, not really. No, we're not rich. I mean, yeah, okay, the house we have is nice. We like the view of the ocean. But the boat, oh, it's just a motorboat. It's nothing special. That's all we got. And so the reporter then asked, well, all right, you're not rich then? No. Well, who can I talk to around here who is? Well, they directed them to the Smiths down the street. You know, go to the Smiths, blah, blah, blah. Get to the question, are you rich? And the Smiths are like, oh, I wouldn't say that. Well, yeah, we like our house very much, and we do have a sailboat, but you need to know that it's not paid off. We've got quite a bit to go on that sailboat, you know. So, no, we have money, but we don't have that kind of money. You need to go talk to the Johnsons in the cul-de-sac over there because they've got a yacht. And they've got a deck, and there's a galley and sleeping quarters, and they take cruises in that thing. Now, they're rich. See where this is going? They feel the same way we do. Everything would be hunky-dory and peachy keen and groovy if it just had a little bit more. And that's the illusion we chase. And that may not be a word that's very popular to either say or to hear when double-digit inflation is raging. I get that, because it's pinching me too. You know, life is tough, and a lot of us feel a whole lot poorer than we used to, and all it takes is one trip to H-E-B to find that out. Awful. But on a global scale, if we have clothes on our back and extra in the closet, if we have decent transportation, and I mean decent, not fancy, if we have a house or an apartment to live in, we have maybe even, a few $1,000s in the bank, we're easily in the top 10% of the world's wealthy. Easily. I think if we're sitting in this room today, we're probably in the top 5%. Do you feel it? I usually don't. But neither do the boat owners. And I think neither does Jeff Bezos, because he's in the process of buying up doctors' offices and wants to own our entire healthcare system. He doesn't think he has enough either. So when Jesus says, be on your guard against every kind of greed, he wasn't judging. He was giving a loving word of caution, because this is something anyone can fall into. I'd just be okay if I had a little bit more. Right. I think there's two things that really strike me hard about this story, because I live with it for the week, and that's what I do. I kind of look at it and listen to it and chew on it and walk around the neighborhood. I was pet sitting this week. I even preached it to the dogs. Very spiritual dogs. They loved it, I think. Anyway, but these are the two things that really, really strike me. One is big houses like big barns and bigger barns, and today's equivalent, block your view of the community. Or they can, if you let them. That's why Jesus said, be on your guard. They can block your view. And, that they do. I mean, if you're running a house like Donna was, she said, we didn't have time to think about the community much, because there was always more staff to hire or work with or fire or something. There was always something that needed fixing. And if you've got a small house, you know what it needs. She says, we hardly had time to think about anyone but ourselves. It wasn't that we were mean. It wasn't that we didn't want to. It was just we were full up with keeping that house going, let alone her bookkeeping job. And her husband was never there because he made great money, but he was never home. It was her and her kids. And she said, we just didn't have time. We were so weighed down. I was so glad when we sold that house, she said. The second thing that strikes me hard about the story is not what is in the story. It's what's missing. And that is any mention of connections and relationships. In that story, we've got the man, the land, the harvest, the small barns, the big barns he wants but doesn't get. But everything is him and his things. He says he's going to eat, drink, and be merry, but he doesn't say with who, or if it's anyone. Maybe he has associates. We do not know. It isolates him. This is a lonely man. And we see that even here. And I was fortunate enough to get to do sales and sales training for Dell Computer for a while. And it's very interesting to hear, because they sent me overseas. I was in Panama City, Panama, and I was in what was then Bangalore, now called Bengaluru in India, because it's a big tech capital. And they said, they would send me over there to do sales training, and then of course they would send their people to us for trainings and conferences and so on, especially the managers. They say when the Indian people come to the United States for the first time, and they get toured around in cars to see what it looks like, their first question is, where is everybody? We're very isolated. When you go to India, as I was lucky enough to do, privilege, I know, I admit it, I've got it. But the sidewalks are full of people. And some of it is necessity. They are selling their wares off their bicycles and carts and so on. But the rest of the time, they are out. They're in the streets, they're on the sidewalks, they are talking to each other, they are having conversations, they are interacting. Their houses mostly are small. Most Indians don't have a whole lot. They have a few rooms, and those are shared with family, extended family, and who knows who else, someone who needs a place. Americans are incredibly lonely. Even those of us who have a lot, and maybe especially those of us who have a lot. It's very easy to be isolated because you can feel very, very self-sufficient. I think it's one thing I love about CCA and places like this. You guys rock. If you come to here or to a place like this every week and hear about Austin Interfaith and hear about the Equal Justice Center and about the Heart of Texas Association and about stuff going on around the world, it mitigates against that isolation. It gets us out of ourselves. It keeps us plugged into the community. And as far as eat, drink, and be merry and all the deedle-diddle-dum, you know, when I did the most of that I've ever done was when I didn't have a car. Poor old Anne, no car. How awful it must be for her. Yeah, right. I was fortunate to live on 2 bus lines. I didn't get much insurance money because that car was old. It got totaled. But I took the opportunity to take the bus and travel all over Austin. And the people I met and the conversations I had and the adventures I had, don't have time to tell you all of them, but I won't. But there was one time that 2 guys at the Cookbook Cafe, and that was my favorite route. Take the 801, go to Republic Square, get my produce at Farmer's Market for the week, go to 2nd Street, Central Library, voted by Time Magazine one of the greatest places on earth. I don't want to sound like a tour guide too much, but that was my route. And I took people there. I went on my own, or I took others, mothers and kids and everybody. And I ate at the Cookbook Cafe, and there were 2 guys there working there, and we got to talking, and they'd been friends for a long time, and were now worked in the restaurant. And they heard about my riding there on Cap Metro, and they said, you know, on every Cap Metro bus, there's at least one crazy person. If you don't know who it is, it's you. So I'll end by saying, you don't have to wait to make your first $1 million to deedle-deedle-diddle-dum. You want to do what Tevye did, do it now. Maybe there's somebody here who's gotten weighed down with too much, or you're too worried about the state of the world, which I also get. They say, how can I go and be carefree when we're weighed down by so much? I say, you know, if you're worried about not doing this because the world is in the shape it's in, you need to do it because the world is in the shape it's in. That way you don't burn out. That way you can stay connected. So yeah, I do my bit. I stay connected to the community, but there is a whole lot of beetle-dum going on in my life right now, and I love it. I hope you have it too. Because you see, the end of the story for the rich fool, it's the same end of the story we're going to have. This very day, Anne, this very night, your life is required of you. Time's up. That's right. When that time comes, I want to be able to say, I'm okay with that. And if I've stayed plugged into the community, if I've moved the needle toward the good side of things in my own small way as one person, and if I know I've had celebration and joy in my life too, then at the end of my days, when they say, Anne, it's time to go, I'm going to say that's fine, because I know that while I was here, I was rich. Amen.